Okay.
Come here, you tiny poodle.
Put him in your hat.
We've got our first viewer. That's exciting. All right, we're going to get started. All right. Hi, folks. Thank you for joining us in the Vermont Wild Kitchen.
Usually this time of year, we would be doing cooking seminars like this live.
The ramps come up during the springtime, and you can find them under deciduous trees, and they really like that full sunlight in the spring when the leaves aren't out.
This is a rear shank, so it came off one of the rear legs. Down here would be the bone that goes to the hoof, and then up here the rest of the leg.
This is my favorite part of any fish, is the cheek. It is just tender, sweet, succulent. It's the best bite. I'll take that over a loin, a belly, a tail any day. And there's a shame there's only two of them, and they're so small on a fish.
Here's an example. It's this really beautiful brick red mushroom with this really gorgeous gloss and white all along the edge.
What we're really trying to do here is just bring you into our kitchens and show you just how easy and just how delicious it can be to not only cook with wild ingredients, but also pair those up with the farm fresh ingredients that can be found throughout Vermont. All right. Hi, folks. Welcome to the Vermont Wild Kitchen. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Shane Rogers, and I am your host. And I'm very excited for this year being our first episode of the year. We have kind of revamped the Vermont Wild Kitchen. It has its own Facebook page, which you should like, share with your friends, and it also has its own email address where you could sign up for updates. So please, by all means, drop your email in. We'll tell you about upcoming episodes, share recipes with you. And for this episode, as you know, our goal here is to really combine and to show just how easy it is to cook with the wonderful wild ingredients in Vermont and how they pair so wonderfully with Vermont's delicious cultivated ingredients. And with this episode today, we have Allie Thomas and Charlie Drury of Vermont Fish and Wildlife, who are going to be showing us how to cook with some smelt, as well as talking about what smelt is and where to find it. And we have Kate Spring of Good Heart Farmstead in Worcester, who is going to be showing us microgreens, how to grow them in your own house, what you can do to pair them. And throughout this episode, we encourage you to drop your own comments, ask questions, thoughts, recipes. And, of course, this is only possible through a collaboration with Vermont Fish and Wildlife and Rural Vermont. So we hope that you'll take some time and you'll give Vermont Fish and Wildlife and Rural Vermont a follow on their social media accounts. We're going to put the links in there. And as I said, we're excited to have Kate Spring, who is her own force on social media too. So please go give Good Heart Farmstead a follow. She is particularly prolific in writing and some wonderful insights. So definitely a pleasure to be following her. So with that being said, I'm going to toss this over to Allie and Charlie, who are going to introduce Smelt and really all the fun things that we can do with them. So Allie and Charlie, feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Shane. So I'm Allie Thomas. I am the director of the Outreach Division for the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. And
Charlie Drury. I also work for the Outreach Division.
And we both like smelt. So smelt are these teeny tiny fish. They are a forage fish or a bait fish, a fish that larger fish depend on, especially trout and salmon, to survive. It's the most important bait fish in the state to support the food web in aquatic ecosystems with large fish. They like cool and deep lakes. They like to hang out in places like Lake Champlain, Lake Willoughby, Dunmore. They're, they only get to like 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. They can get to 10, 12 inches, but typically when you catch smelt, they're about 6, 7, 8 inches. And each lake is a little different what size the smelt are. They're an interesting fish in that they're really only caught in Vermont during the winter time. You could catch them at other times of year, but really on any effective level to catch enough smelt to eat, because they are delicious, and we're going to show you that in a minute here. It's something that you do through the ice. They're a schooling fish that eat tiny little animals in the water called zooplankton, which zooplankton eat photoplankton, tiny little plants. And so what you want to do fishing for them is attract photoplankton to a spot, and then zooplankton will follow, and then these guys in a big school will hopefully follow close to that spot so you can fish for them through the hole. And what you do is typically, there are places where there's an afternoon bite or a daytime bite and you can fish for them. Most of the time you go out at night for smelt. So that makes it extra cool because there's a lot of nighttime in Vermont, right? Especially in the winter time. So it's cool to have something fun to do. So you go out on the ice, you drill some holes, you just need the lightest little jigging rod, a type of fishing rod that you use while ice fishing, with real light line and a tiny little grub or spike, which is like a maggot. And you lightly jig for these tiny fish, but you can put a light in your hole. There are specialty lights. Sometimes I've seen people use plastic bottles with like a $2 light from the hardware store, just make sure it's water sealed. And they stick it down the hole, and that light attracts photoplankton, which attracts zooplankton, which attract, hopefully, if it's a good night, a big school of smelt. And you can just jig, 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 and keep getting these tiny little smelt to hit your line. Some people save the smelt if they have bait fish endorsements and they keep them alive and healthy. They save them to use as bait fish for larger fish if they're going to go for lake trout or landlocked Atlantic salmon. But they're also delicious to eat. And so that's what we're going to show you. So this is the smelt. For all this, what's that? Yeah, they're really small. These are small. And you really have to, it's cool. You have to get used to what it feels like to have a bite because it's so itty bitty. The hardest part, our department has a program called Let's Go Fishing. And we actually take people out on ice fishing clinics where we teach them about the ecology and management and habitat conservation of different species and the skills to fish for them. And the hardest thing with smelt clinics is teaching people when they have a bite because it's so light. But once you hit a school, it's like constant. It's fun. So this is a smelt. You can see.
You can really see them down the hole too if you're using a light while you're fishing at night. They kind of congregate underneath the hole, and it's really neat to watch them. You watch them get your hook, and you pick them up, and then you put them in a bucket, and they come off the line themselves. It's really a fun thing.
Yeah, you don't always have to change your bait because they don't even get that. Sometimes it starts happening so fast that you just take them off and put them in your bucket and go back in. And sometimes I get flustered and I put them back in the fishing hole. And then I'm like, I need to calm down. So what I'm going to show is how to actually, one thing people do sometimes when they smelt fish is that you cut the head off and you make a line from the vent forward. And I'm going to do this for you on camera in a second here. And you take the guts out that you don't want to eat. And you can just take it, put it in warm oil, and take it out with the tongs and eat it, bones and all, like that.
Small ones like this for sure.
Yeah, not a big one, but a small one. So that's going, the oil's going. And as far as the oil goes, 350, 375 degrees is what the temperature should be. I've never, ever used a thermometer. I just throw water in it or eyeball it. But technically, 350 to 375. So Charlie's going to tilt. Admittedly, these little guys can be a little tricky to do this, but can you see me, Shane?
Yeah, we can see you. That's
okay.
About the average size fish that I catch when I go out. So this is really informative for me.
There's a little finesse to cutting these guys, but it's funny because it's so easy, but they're little, so you gotta be careful. So on the back of their head, they have a hard bone right here on their head. It ends. You can feel with your fingers, you feel where the hard bone ends. Right behind that, you're gonna cut a slit. This is just a regular fillet knife. I use this for panfish rods, an 8-inch fillet knife. This is big for what I'm doing. So you cut behind their head, and you feel once you get through the vertebrae, it gets easy real fast, just like that. Then I'm gonna flip it over and you go through the vent. And this is where you have to be careful because if you go too hard or fast, it rips it because it's so itty bitty. But if you gently serrate it real slowly, and it really like takes one to practice and then you're good. It's a pretty quick learning curve with these guys. Just real gently and patiently serrate up the fish. And I'm shaking because it's freezing in this kitchen. And then
it's okay to be nervous on the Vermont Wild Kitchen.
I promise it's not nerves. So then I have a slit from the vent up and I have the head mostly detached. I take my finger and I put it through and I take the head off with the guts. So
very
that's
easy, it seems.
Super easy. And so what you're seeing in here along the vertebrae are their kidneys, and you just kind of scrape it with your thumb to get that bile out of there. And then you have a delicious little fillet. So I just put it in a little bowl of water to clean it. You never want to like soak fish in water right after you fillet them. It kind of, it ruins the integrity of the meat. So you can clean it off, but you don't want to like hang out in water. I'm going to dry it just a smidge, and then I'm going to put it into some hot oil, and I'll take it out and show you what it looks like. But then as I'm doing this, Charlie is going to take over because she does something even cooler with Smelt. So Charlie.
We do have a comment from Nick who says in Michigan, we dip for Smelt with 5-gallon buckets when they're running in the rivers, and you can't even imagine catching them one at a time. So yes, I think that's probably the fun of it, is then now you get to find a whole new way to catch Smelt that you find so abundant.
It's really common in other states. So Smelt spawn in the spring, which means they go and they lay eggs in the spring, and they do that by running the rivers. They go upstream rivers from large bodies of water, like big trout and other fish do sometimes. So in a lot of states, it's legal to catch them by nets and keep them by the buckets in the spring when they're spawning. That's not the case in Vermont.
Do not do that here.
In Vermont, it is not legal in Vermont. In Vermont, you have to use a line and a hook. You can have 2 hooks per 1 line, 2 lines per person. but that is it. There are no, in regards to regulations of Smelt, you can keep as many as you want, but there is always the rule, don't keep anything unless you're going to responsibly take care of it. So if you're going to eat it or you're going to keep it alive and you have your bait fish endorsement, fine. Otherwise, throw them back. So I'm going to put it in the oil while Charlie shows you one more method of cooking.
So Allie's method is really good for when you're on the ice. You don't need any extra breading or anything like that. But if you're home and you've harvested some and you're bringing them home to eat or freeze for later, a good recipe is just some flour. And I'm just going to eyeball some measurements here, guys. But it's just basically a little bit of flour dredge and some panko breadcrumbs. And this is a real versatile recipe because you can add any seasoning you want. So you can do Old Bay spice or some lemon pepper, anything you want as far as seasoning to your style. Add some spice to it. And basically you're just going to dredge them in this mix. And again, the good thing with this recipe, besides being versatile for seasoning, is you can eat these right away after you bread them, or you can put them on a sheet tray and freeze them, and then put them in a safe container for the freezer and eat them another time. So it's a great recipe for now or later.
That's amazing. I swear, trying to find Old Bay in the grocery store in Vermont is like searching for the Holy Grail sometimes. So I'm very excited that you mentioned it because it is one of my favorite seasonings that not only goes well with fish, but goes well with poultry or birdseed. There's the container. Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. So the fish Allie we're working with were much smaller Smelt. These are some larger size Smelt, and this is what people probably catch mostly out there is this size. The bones are a little crunchier in a Smelt this big, where the size that Allie's working with, those bones you don't even notice are there when you eat that. Where these you might get a little crunch, but they're easily removed anyways once you cook it. And or try it anyways. You might find it's not that bad. So when you are dredging them, just put it in the cavity and on the outside. You're just going to toss them around in the flour. Again, like this, just make sure you get it inside and out and then shake it off all the excess. And like I said, from here, you can just put these on a cookie sheet and freeze them and then bag them up after, and or from here, you just drop them into a fryer.
That's amazing. And it helps for if you only catch a few, if you don't run into your school, or if you're not feeling like pulling them out, you're always going to have enough in the freezer for the long run. So
That's right.
for folks who maybe haven't fished on ice that often, don't really even know where to look when they go out, aside from just digging a random hole, what would be your all suggestion for people who are reading, say, a depth chart for the first time and looking for a place to go out to find smelt?
In general, I've usually caught them in about 15, 20 feet. They're schooled fish. What you're doing is you're trying to get them to come from the depths and come up to your light where your feeding is happening. So if you're looking at a depth chart, you want to get to a spot where you can pull something from the depths. You're not too far in the shallows. You're not right off the shore.
They're a deep cold water fish, so they're down there. You have to get them to come up to you. And sometimes you are, like Ali said, jigging them 20 feet under the ice, and then sometimes you do have to go lower. So it's really, dependent on that day, I think. I don't think I've ever gone out and it's the same every time. So you want to work it. What I usually do is drop my line all the way to the bottom, and I come up about 15 feet off the bottom, and then I just keep working my way up until I find a school. And then you'll feel a little, like Ali said, it's very gentle bite. You almost want to put your line over your pinky so that you feel that little tug on it. Otherwise, you really don't feel it on like a calloused finger.
So this is the fried smelt, and it smells amazing in here, by the way. And Charlie, tell me what this fresh smelt smells like for viewers at home.
Watermelon.
Smells like watermelon.
Trout.
They're like sweet, amazing gifts from the water.
Yep.
They smell like watermelon.
That's amazing.
And this is like fried watermelon. And we'll do a taste test later.
Yeah, I just love this because it seems like it's an easy process, something you could also do with your kids, and will go infinitely well with any of the seasonal vegetables that are out or in your cellar at this point.
There's one of the bigger ones fried.
Yeah, they kind of split open when they're ready.
Nice
and a lot
delicious.
of people will actually bring a little propane heater onto the ice, and they'll just fry up some smelt right on the ice as they're fishing, because as we all know, everything tastes better outside when it's cold, but these are actually amazing always. And so it's extra amazing outside when it's cold and they're warm and fresh. So they're fun to do it right on the spot.
Also,
that is amazing.
Smelt tails are really delicious too. They're little crispy chips, delicious. The whole thing is so good.
See, and that's why we do the Vermont Wild Kitchen. For those who never even knew that the rainbow smelt were not only abundant in Vermont, but just as delicious. And you all are gonna fry up the rest of these fish while we talk with Kate about some microgreens, and we're going to come back at the end and kind of see how things are going with a special taste tester, I think, the person who might be behind the camera in Vermont Fish and Wildlife Land. But we'll see if they can cajole him out. So thanks, Ali and Charlie. That was really wonderful, super informative. I know I haven't gone smelt fishing, but I'm already imagining where I can go start jigging for those amazing fish. And Kate, we are so excited to have you on. Oh, let's see if I can make Kate larger. There we go. So I have personally had the pleasure of working with Kate through New Leaders Council last year and through lots of different places in the food system. And I'm so excited to have you on. Like I said, Kate is the owner and the farmer and the social media extraordinaire behind Good Heart Farmstead in Worcester. I'm dropping all her info in there again. So Kate, welcome. We're so excited to have you. What are you doing with us today?
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited to be here. And I'm also excited to have learned about smelt because I have never gone ice fishing and now I want to try it. And so tonight I'm going to talk about microgreens, and I'll hold up a bowl here. So microgreens are what they sound like. They're tiny little greens that basically you plant the seed and you harvest it. Well, depending on the crop, it can be like, within a month, generally speaking. So I've got a tray of pea shoots, which we call pea shoots something slightly different than microgreens, call them shoots instead of micros. But the general idea is that you seed a tray really thickly, and then they grow up. And I've got another tray. These are radishes. And so you can see, like, you would never plant radishes that thickly in your garden on purpose. But when they get to about this high, you can just take a sharp knife or scissors and clip right along the base of the soil. And you end up having this really bright burst of flavor and also of nutrition in the middle of the winter. So at Good Heart Farmstead, where my husband Ed and I farm in Worcester, we do year-round CSAs, so selling through community-supported agriculture. People sign up for a season and they get a share of the harvest every week for that season. But in the wintertime, we really like to make sure people still get greens. So we always have microgreens or pea shoots going in our seedling room under grow lights. They can also be grown in a heated greenhouse too. But they're super delicious and they're really fun because they are so quick and you get local greens in January and February and March. So in this bowl, we've got a mix. There's a lot of different varieties that you can do. I mentioned pea shoots and radishes. We also really love herbs like basil or cilantro. We make a lot of tacos in our household. I'm actually going to be making some tortillas in a little while. If you don't make your own tortillas, there's some like really great Vermont tortillas from All Souls Tortilleria, so I would check them out. And yeah, we put cilantro and mizuna or arugula or radish microgreens on the top of those tacos, and that's one of our winter standbys. I don't really have much, we don't cook microgreens because they are so tender and delicate, but even with their small size, they just have like a really big flavor. Another really cool thing about microgreens is that there was a study with the USDA and I believe it was the University of Maryland, their ag college, did a study on the nutrition of microgreens and found that microgreens can have up to 40 times more nutrients than the mature leaf from the mature crop. So you're really getting like everything packed in a very small container of greens.
That's amazing. And so for folks who maybe aren't familiar with growing these themselves, or they want to give it a try, whether that's on a windowsill or underneath a grow light, like you said, are folks just using regular seeds, or are they like, what are they looking for when they go to the store? What are you putting in, and what other supplies are they needing to maybe give this a try in their own house?
Mm-hmm. So you can have a bunch of different setups. There's I'm going to tell you like the most simple to what I would recommend to have the most success with them. So at the very like basic level, you need a shallow tray with drainage holes. So you might use we have some specific trays that are really shallow, but you might have what's called a 10 by 20 tray that you can find in your like pretty much any garden or farm supply store. And as long as you have drainage holes so that the soil doesn't get too bogged down, you're good to go. But if you don't have a tray, you can reuse a clamshell salad container from the store and just like poke some holes in there. And then what you should do after that is put about an inch of soil, potting soil, and I recommend Fort V from Vermont Compost, which I believe is sold almost everywhere in Vermont. So if you go to either a co-op or gardener supply or any kind of farm and yard store, you'll likely find Vermont Compost Fort V there. So use an inch of that. And then the thing about microgreens is you want to sow the seeds really thickly. So you can just scatter them across the soil, and depending on what seed you're doing, like if you're using really small seeds versus small versus large seeds, so pea shoots versus basil, you can this is where like you experiment a little bit. You can have some fun figuring out what the right density is for you, but it's a little hard to show on this live at the moment. But what you'll get at the end is something that is like looking like this. So it's really dense as it fills in, but you want to still see some soil so that the plants have enough room to like grow and leaf out. So once you have your soil in your tray and your seeds on top of the soil, you can use something just to tamp the seeds down into the soil a little bit and then mist them. So you could, if you have like a little spray bottle, use a spray bottle to keep them moist. And within a few days, you'll start to see them germinate. And then you just want to keep them lightly misted. So you don't want them to dry out at all. I recommend for most like the best harvest at the end is to use some grow lights, or if you just have like one grow light, that really helps them grow uniformly. If you don't have a grow light, you can find a south facing window. Just find your sunniest window and give it them as much light as you can. When you're growing in a window, you'll start to see them sort of lean this way or that way, depending on where the light is coming. So just try to flip it every once in a while so they don't get, flopping over in one direction too far. And then once they are, I'll hold this up again, but these are, a few inches, 3 to 4 inches, or you can look at the leaves. It's hard to tell with the color here, but you want to see them go past so the cotyledons are the very first leaves that the plant will put out. And then the next 2 leaves that come out are called the true leaves. So you can clip them once you see the true leaves start to leaf out. And you can also experiment with like what stage you want to harvest them at. The great thing about microgreens, if you're growing them at home, is that you don't have to harvest the entire tray at once. You can really just harvest, you could harvest a quarter of it or just a few snips to add on to your eggs in the morning or to put on your tacos. Or like for basil, we really love putting that in. We make a lot of tomato sauce and freeze it, and then we'll thaw the tomato sauce out and put some fresh basil microgreens in there, and it just like makes it feel like it's summer again. Yeah, so really good. Once they're harvested, you want to eat them within like 3 to 5 days, and you can store them in a plastic bag or container in the fridge.
And they are so good. And
That's
Kate,
it.
you had a wonderful write-up in the New York Times about microgreens that we're putting in the chat right now, which has a lot of these tips in it that you shared. But I did, before we move back to Allie and Charlie, I know you've worked so hard with the Good Heart Farmstead to make sure that it is also mission driven in addition to taking care of the earth and the environment around you. And I just was wondering, as a member of rural Vermont and, really trying to make sure that your community is fed, like what made you pursue that and how are you working to feed your community too with the food that you're growing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like you said, we're a mission-driven farm, and our mission is to help increase local food access for low-income Vermonters. So there are a few ways we do that. One is through working with the NOFA Vermont Farm Share Program that helps subsidize CSA shares. So we raise money every year to put towards subsidized shares, and then NOFA will match that money and help us out in that way. And that means that if you qualify, you can get a season's worth of local organic vegetables for half the price. In 2020, we started doing something that we called the Good Heart Fund, which is where we basically put 10% of all of our full price CSA sales forward to those subsidies. So every time someone signs up for a full price CSA, we take 10% of what they give us and give that to a low income family in order to make the food more accessible for them. And it's just been a really nice way to build in a giving forward through our farm. And so those are like two things that we do individually, but even beyond that, we have seen that working with organizations like Rural Vermont and NOFA Vermont, and showing up for like small farm action days that Rural Vermont has, being in touch with our legislators. We've hosted on-farm events where we have legislators come to the farm and take a tour and really hear what we need as farmers in order to be successful in the state. And we've seen how legislation can really positively affect our farm and therefore our customers. So one example is getting more funding for subsidized shares that goes statewide, or you can see it also in like the Vermont feed and farm to school, having policy that supports farmers being able to sell to schools, for example, means all Vermont kids are getting access to local food, which is awesome. Or with Rural Vermont championing, can't say that word tonight, but being champions of on-farm slaughter. So we haven't raised livestock every year, but there have been a handful of years where we have raised broilers and slaughtered them and processed them on the farm. So being able to legally do that and sell meat makes it more viable for our farm to run in Vermont. So those are just sort of like the quick examples that come to mind. But I've also found that just being in touch with our legislators, that they're really receptive, that they want to hear from the people that they are working on behalf of. So even if there might be some competing ideas or we don't always see eye to eye, I've always found that when I send an email to one of my representatives or have them actually come to the farm, they want to hear from people, and so I think it's just a great thing to be involved, and you don't have to be out there every single day of the year. That's what like people like at Rural Vermont are doing, like working on behalf of farmers as well. But just picking like maybe once a quarter, deciding to like read what's happening in the state house or reach out to, your representative or senator, I find creates a really positive feedback loop, and it helps farms individually, but it helps us at a state level too. I just think about COVID, when COVID first hit and all the food shortages that we saw, but we also felt really grateful to be in Vermont, where we at least have a pretty resilient local food system. And if we want to make that even more resilient and more accessible to all Vermonters, then working on a state level is really important. So.
Yeah, and all of these issues intersect so closely with issues that are affecting the wild food populations as well, and access to land and really everything. So, Kate, we're so thankful to have you on. We, again, I'm always very excited about microgreens, especially in the throes of winter, and just how easy they are to actually grow, but also pick up from a local farmer. And we had someone comment when we put out this episode, they're like, Smelt and microgreens, like I want French fries, but I don't think they understand just how delicious some fried smelt, maybe in a taco with some microgreens and a dressing, would actually be. So I'm very excited to have you on. And for folks who are tuning in, Kate also has the Good Heart Greens cookbook. So you can sign up through her email, and they will send that to you through the website that you sign up from.
Yeah, so if you go to our website, goodheartfarmstead.com, you'll see a little pop-up where you can sign up to get a little cookbook, cookbook, because we don't cook the microgreens, but you'll get ways to use all the different greens that we grow on the farm.
Amazing. And again, just a big shout out to our partners, Rural Vermont, too, because they are doing a ton of amazing work here in the state to advocate for folks like Kate and folks like us who are on the show. So with that, Kate, thank you. And we're going to check in one last time with Allie and Charlie and see how things are going. So Allie and Charlie, oh, I did it again. I got to knock the cobwebs out of my Vermont Wild Kitchen hosting duties here. Let's see those fried smelts.
Hopefully you can see them.
So these are the fried smelt with all the food groups, melted butter and lemons. And the only thing that would truly make this better are Kate's microgreens, because that would be delicious. And we are missing some green on this plate. But what an easy and amazing way to add green would have some sprinkles of sprouts on here. It would just be so great. So I really wish I would have got some before this episode so we could add it. But we are going to test these to see how good they're. And I promise these are better than French fries.
Yes,
so
way better.
And one thing I did want to say is, like eating fish like this and eating any fish from wild waters of Vermont, that's a really special gift. And I think it's something that, our department wants to celebrate in the most genuine, thoughtful, and sustainable way. And so we actually do have a Let's Go Fishing program that, as I mentioned before, focuses on habitat conservation and fisheries management, because none of these fish would be possible, right, without decent management and beautiful habitat. So we actually have the Let's Go Fishing coordinator, Corey Hart, here tonight to be the taste tester, because this is a dude who will be out in negative degrees teaching people how to fish for every type of fish you can imagine on any type of weather event year round. So if anyone gets to choose if this is good or not, it is Corey. So Corey's going to come on, and the only rule is, Corey, you have to dunk it in the butter, because butter, it's melted. It's hard to see.
Okay.
As if Corey has any problem with that.
Oh, wait, hold on. This is Corey.
Perfect. Well,
Hi, Corey. Welcome.
Yeah, I've been standing behind the laptop this whole time.
He's been holding my dog the whole time, so he deserves some fish.
So now is when we get to judge them on their cooking abilities.
And the verdict?
That's good. So I'm going to keep eating because it appears that they just made me a dinner of smelt. For anybody that's interested on joining on a program to learn about either smelt fishing or introduction to fishing, for just targeting any old species under the ice, we have a list of programs up on our website at vtfishandwildlife.com. If you wait and check tomorrow, there will be more programs added. Most of the programs that are on there right now are full, so I'll just warn you right away. So if you wait and check tomorrow afternoon, there'll be a bunch more added that you'll be able to register on.
Amazing. And just a quick plug too, it is Free Fishing Day on January 29th, which means that you can go out without a license and you can fish for smelt, you can fish for perch, you can fish really for anything at this point, within reason of the guidelines, but they did condense the guidelines. So Kate, if you are trying to get out on the ice, let me know, because we can possibly make that happen if you want to try to go ice fishing. I can't promise that I'm any good, though, at tracking this down, so it'll be an adventure.
Well, that would be fun. And just a plug for fishing that I just thought of. When my son was born, my in-laws bought him a lifetime fishing and hunting license. And it was such a deal. Like, if you've got kids that may or may not want to fish or hunt, you should just get a lifetime license, because it's a really good deal.
Growing up
Absolutely.
Growing up in most kids will fish, so it's a great gift.
Wonderful. Well, folks, that wraps up our first Vermont Wild Kitchen episode of the year. Like I said, we are on a new platform with a new page. I encourage everybody to sign up for email updates from Vermont Wild Kitchen. And please, please go check out Good Heart Farmstead on Facebook and Instagram and sign up for email updates. Sign up for updates from Vermont Fish and Wildlife and Rural Vermont. And we are going to be coming back to you all next month, the third Thursday, which is February 17th at 5 p.m. I'm not sure what we're going to be cooking, but if you all have any ideas or you just want to talk wild food and cultivated food, you can always email info@vtwildkitchen.org. And with that, a big thank you again to Vermont Fish and Wildlife and rural Vermont for making this happen. And I am going to wish everybody a lovely and hopefully warm evening. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
fishing.
Happy
Bye.
fishing.